Hi, everybody. I'm Ralph Ben Murgy. Welcome to Not That Kind of Rabbi. Oh, my goodness. Where are we? What are we doing? What are we doing? I was thinking about restraint. Built into every religious architecture are tools for restraint. The most obvious one that can come to anyone's mind is fasting. By fasting, you have to stop the urge, the desire, the craving. All those things have to be brought into some sort of a container and then put to the side, at least for 24 or 5 hours. And every major religion has, at its core, these mechanisms that help us to not only appreciate what we take for granted by fasting, for instance, but also to teach us to do without, to not constantly give to our desire. And yet the culture we live in is one completely built on a machine of desire. Advertising itself is all about desire. I know you've got a Lexus, but you really, if you were really, you should have a Tesla. And you shouldn't just have a Tesla. You should have like that, not the 30K Tesla. No, my friend. You deserve the 100K Tesla. That's the one you deserve. And I mean, you deserve it. So what it does is gives you this feeling of inadequacy on a perpetual basis. So we're never enough. I was speaking to a friend about this yesterday, and he said that he has a friend, and she had invested in the pot business as pot was becoming a commercial thing. And she was up to $4 million in terms of what she'd invested, was now up to $4 million. And she stayed with it because there was a chance this was going to get even better. And it just kept going down. You know, like when you're really bad at playing poker and you have some money and then you lose a hand and you lose another hand and you think, you can only lose another hand. And next thing you know, you got nothing. So she ended up with way less than $4 million. And he said to her, well, why didn't you get out at 4 million? Like, that's a lot of money considering what your investment was. And she says, because I kept thinking it could be 8. I could have 8 million. And now she doesn't have hardly anything. So this casino culture that we live in is one that is making the pandemic seem like a horrible irritant, this thing in our way. I mean, there are lots of positive things that are coming from us being together in our homes and being in ourselves a little more and not running the distraction of, I got to get here, I got to get there, I got to do this, I got to do that. But still, there's this indignity that's been foisted upon us. How dare it tell me what to do? Governments are bad. People are silly. They're overreacting. It's the flu. You know, these incredible pieces that just really make you wonder, are we really going to take great lessons out of this? Are we really going to do something with this information? Have we spent any of the time being present? This was one of our best opportunities, perhaps in our lifetime, with distraction being much less than it has been before, to actually explore what it is to be here. Take a walk. That's what we keep getting told. Don't go and congregate in places, but take a walk. Walk in nature. Do we even find, there were times in Toronto where I had to drive 45 minutes to find nature. By the time I found it, I was so irritated that I didn't care. I was just like, well, where's the parking? I can't find the God's sake. But here we are in this moment that in about 5 months won't be the same anymore, and we'll probably be able to walk around together. And yes, I really miss hugging people. I really miss being with people. I absolutely, spiritually, if spirituality is about relationship, then this is tough. Except I do have the luxury of family in my home. And I really do not take that for granted. Even when any of the 4 of us is extremely annoying in a specific day. Almost never, no, as much me as it's everybody. It's the way it rolls. But we do have a moment. And in that moment, we can find some stillness. And in that stillness, we can find our true self. I really believe that. I really believe that we can move away from the egoic nature of the struggle and the desire and the distraction that is part of what we call the everyday life. And we can find ways to connect to the fact that there is underneath all this goalie equipment of ego, there is us, the true self that is connected to everything and everyone. I was reading something beautiful yesterday. I'm rereading Alan Marinis's Everyday Holiness, which is a Musar guide. And Musar is about, I guess the simplest way to talk about it is soul traits, sometimes character traits, in Hebrew, midot. And these soul traits, humility, gratitude, compassion, order, there's a whole curriculum of how to spend a week with each one of these ideas in yourself, with something you say to yourself during the beginning of a day about generosity. And then 3 things you can do in a day that are generous. Because there is that moment when you pass that homeless person where you think, no, I don't like their pitch. And you keep walking. And then you think, now I feel horrible. And they feel horrible. And there's no dignity for anybody in that. But then if it's generosity, true spiritual generosity, I'm not here as the judge. Whether your pitch is good or not, you're actually reduced to begging. Here's a toonie. I'm not going to follow you to see if you spent it on alcohol. I don't care. Here's a toonie. It's about giving it to you, not, and how are you going to spend that money? So generosity becomes a thing you do 3 times a day. And then at the end of the day, you write journal on it. Alan Marinis, who wrote this book, actually is going to be a guest of mine in January. And I'm really looking forward to that conversation because I think if we could develop that spiritual gym, that fitness program that religion often gives people, then we might actually be able to really have gleaned something from this besides it being something that got in the way of us doing the things we always do. So we'll see. As they say in the trade, Debarty, I have spoken. You as the audience say Shamati, and then we're good. Except people constantly forget to say Shamati or Debarty, so it's the way it is. My guest, a dear heart, someone who, one of the gifts of moving to Hamilton was to be in contact with her and her husband. Her husband's a rabbi. She's a cantor. And I love them both. They're wonderful people with generous hearts who do wonderful work. And when I said not that kind of rabbi, it's because the amount of grief that comes with running a synagogue and everybody's needs and wants and desires was something I don't think I can do. I'm not a big enough heart for that, I don't think. But these two do it. So I figured I'd do one at a time. So Cantor Paula Baruch is my guest here on Not That Kind of Rabbi. Hi, and thank you and welcome. How are you?
Shamati, Shamati. I
Shamati.
heard your opening. It's so many interesting things. It made me think of when you said restraint.
Mm.
That in religion, do we have restraining orders? Could we use them that word that way
In a kind way,
in a kind way?
right? The whole idea of, the Sabbath. I've always struggled with the amount of restraint required of a person if you follow the laws, the halakhic laws of Sabbath. And yet, I say to people, if the whole world did Sabbath, did Shabbat, if the whole world did it, we would reduce our greenhouse gas emissions per year by 7%. Just that alone, don't turn on the lights, don't drive the car, don't just stay away from all the stuff that constitutes our life. What do
No
you think of
fire
that?
starting.
Now, you're in the Reformed tradition where a
Yes.
person can drive
We
to the
start fires.
synagogue
We
and
start fires all the
you
time.
can watch
Yes.
TV, use your phone. So, do you ever get this feeling of what if we just really went for it and did 25 hours without these things?
Well, so interesting. Like, what level do you choose? And I think that's really the point, is for each person. I'm not talking about a movement or a congregation, but for each person, what incremental change could you invite to maybe feel more Shabbatness, more at rest, more at peace, maybe more mindful and thoughtful for
So
that day,
not,
or maybe a moment in that day.
yeah. So
You know,
not all or nothing,
right?
but
It
how
can't
can
be,
you,
right?
well,
Yeah,
for some people it is all or
I
nothing.
guess. Yeah,
For the
absolutely.
Orthodox, it is all or nothing. Like if you're not doing it all, you're not doing it, right? And
Well,
yet,
but there's always been what a denomination or a rabbi preaches, let's say, and
mhm.
what the members actually do,
Right.
right? So the party line, the preaching may be, you don't drive, but that might mean for an individual at that, in that environment, they drive to a place where they won't be seen driving, and then they walk.
Right.
Honestly, like
Yeah,
I
yeah,
have
yeah.
friends that are Orthodox that would do that.
Yeah, no, I have relatives who do that. Not even friends. He's like,
Closer to home for
oh,
you.
look, it's my cousin. And well, he doesn't look that tired for a guy who lives as far as he lives from the synagogue. And yet I find myself interested in that. But I want to, can we start at the beginning for you?
Sure. Which beginning?
The beginning, how were you, what,
Gray sheets.
where, yes, your bray sheet. Where were you? How were you brought up and how did you end up where you are? So,
Oh my gosh, it's a big Megillah, Ralph. I can
yeah.
make it short,
No,
or
it's a podcast. We do what
yeah,
we
I was
want.
gonna say, like, when my husband, who's a rabbi, tells stories, they're very long. Like, he loves to tell the story of how we met. It's very long. When I tell it, it's like two sentences done. So,
I saw
so
her. I fell in love. It was over. No, that's what he
over.
should
It's
say.
over.
All right. So
Um,
brought up where?
yeah, brought up in Tera, Ontario, Tara, which is a little hamlet 8 miles west of Owen Sound, Ontario. So we had to go that far to get to town to go grocery shopping on a small farm that had been a pioneering farm in my family. So you can see, and my last name as Baruch. So that's kind of an interesting thing. Baruch, a farm girl? No, it can't be. So growing up, and if you're an Owen Sounder or in Grey County, you remember when they used to have phone books, Ralph?
Yes, I
Like,
do. And
yeah,
yellow pages for that
yellow
matter.
pages. So in the white pages, which were actually like, now you can't give that information, right? It's
Yeah.
privacy, I guess, or something.
Yeah. As
Phone
if we
books,
have that. Yeah.
they
Yeah.
were all there. And there were like 3 pages of the name Barfoot. So my birth name growing up was Barfoot, and it's a big pioneering farming clan that's up in that area, and we were one of that clan.
Were you United Church or
Yes, United Church, and my mom and dad were very involved at the church. My dad, I think, of my two parents, very spiritual and a spiritual seeker, and that comes in a little bit later in the story. So he did a little bit of lay preaching when the minister was away, and and yeah, it was quite a community. It was a tiny little church on Highway 21 that goes to between Owen Sound and Sauble Beach. We were just off that highway, and I remember going to Sunday school, coloring pictures. I was just recently, I've been really reconnecting with my sister on a deeper level. In my family, there are four siblings. I'm the baby. Being the baby is awesome because other people, your older siblings fulfill those expectations that the parents have. And by the time you're like the little last one, you're just cute and you can do almost whatever you want. So I feel really, really, what would we say? Young child privilege for sure.
I'm the youngest of four, so I'm with
So
you.
you get it. We're in the same
Totally get it.
boat.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and the other thing about my siblings is that my mother left many years between us. She wanted each of us to have our own dedicated childhood. time with her, which was amazing. So I'm the youngest. My sister's 6 years older. My next brother's another 5 years.
Wow.
And then my oldest brother is 16 years older than me. So he kind of like feels parental now that my parents are no longer living.
Right.
And interesting. Anyway, so growing up in this environment and at the little United Church, the little yellow church, which my dad helped to build. I remember that was part of the family story. And on our farm concession 11 in Derby Township, we would go every single Sunday, sometimes walk, and it was about a mile to walk to the church. And, like it's like back in the olden days,
we had no shoes. We had no shoes. We walked in the snow.
Exactly. Now, so looking back, I think it's interesting that because I see United Church as like the reform movement of Christianity in a way, right?
Absolutely. I just had the former moderator of the United Church, Marty Tyndall, on this show.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, when I used to do stand-up, I would ask people, how were you brought up to see what religion they were? And some people would just say, in classic Christian dominant culture, answer, oh, nothing. And I go, oh, United.
That's what that is, right?
Get my guitar.
So here's the interesting story is each of my siblings, we had a very different childhood because of that age separation. And by the time I was coming of age, 6, 7, 8 years old, I was really a spiritually leaning kid. Like I can remember lying on the lawn at the farm and looking up at a starry night and really pondering what is out there. What does this mean? I'm so small. It's so big. Where does it fit together? And Sunday or Saturday mornings, I remember, I used to cuddle with my dad while my mom made breakfast. And he was the one I would ask all these deep questions, and he'd love to talk about it as well. Well, little did I know, he was seeking in the direction of a fundamentalist faith. And he ended up grabbing onto that faith when I was about 10, 11 years old. And my parents ended up getting divorced over it.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that's hard when in a relationship, when spiritual paths are not at least similar, if not the same. It is hard, isn't it?
Aren't you curious what he went for?
Well, you said fundamentalist, but now you've got me really thinking that he took a real hard turn. Was it within Christianity?
It was Jehovah's Witness. So interesting. So
was there a community of Jehovah's Witnesses in Owen Sound?
They're like Chabad. They're everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Because they're missionary. They have to go everywhere. That's their whole raison d'etre.
Do you remember what your reaction was to him sort of announcing his faith?
What I remember was before he announced his faith, the shtick in our little country concession was, well, we had those party lines. Do you remember those?
Yeah.
Like it would ring a certain way and that was your pickup. It would ring 2 longs and that was us. And a long and a short was the neighbor across and so on. But people would call you and say, Jehovah's Witnesses they're coming around, they're coming down. And everyone would pretend not to be home.
Oh, no.
That's what I remember.
Trick or treat.
It was like, that's community. We tell you when they're coming.
Man-eating shark. Yeah.
So then my dad was one of these people. If I wanted to spend time with him, I'd be out having to go door to door with him.
This must have been very confusing for you.
It's funny how resilient human beings are. Like it kind of seemed normal. What was different was family celebrations drastically changed. So, there was no Christmas anymore because they don't do Christmas. There was no birthdays because they don't do birthdays.
Wow.
In fact, interestingly to Judaism, the only thing that they celebrate, they have one celebration in the year, and it's Nisan 15, Passover Day.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting? That's like their.
And do they acknowledge it as Passover?
They call it Nisan. Maybe it's 14.
So they actually only acknowledge Passover.
They don't call it Passover, but
what do they call it? The Paschal
Nisan 14, I think they call it.
Toyota 14.
Yes, Toyota.
All right. So
So
you're now in your mother, I assume, stays with the United Church
yeah, well, she kind of like drifts away. Like she's
because
had
she's
it with
not
her
that
boyfriend. It's
spiritual.
like this went bad. I'm just gonna
Yeah.
survive, right? Because she didn't have the ability to drive. She had to learn how to drive.
Wow.
She had to learn how to, work. I mean, she got a job at the Woolco department store, and God love her. She made a life for her and me. Like
Because
I look,
that's what was left by then, right? You and her.
yeah,
Your
exactly.
siblings had
Everyone
all
else
grown
was
up.
gone and on their own by then. So here's where things get interesting. I'm still got this spiritual yearning, but I'm not into what my dad's doing. And if I
Right.
was ever into it, it's just to have a relationship with him.
Right.
It didn't satisfy me spiritually at all. In fact, it's so interesting when you look in the Awake magazine, I think was their magazine, and
Yep.
the
Yep.
Watchtower. They have the
Watchtower. Yeah.
thing.
And awake.
One is kind of like easy listening, and one is like more, I can't remember which. I think the Watchtower is more like Awake is the easy listening version. And it's so, it was like, even when I was a child, I would read the articles in this because he would always be handing them to me, my dad. And they'd have like a little paragraph and questions at the bottom that you're supposed to answer the questions based on the paragraph you just read.
Hmm.
Do you follow?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
were so obvious and mundane. And literally, you were regurgitating
Right.
what you read. So it's like, I don't know,
We,
like,
just making sure that you're following the
or that you're
the party
memorizing your
line. Yeah, you remember.
data,
Yeah, it's
right? Like,
dogma.
yeah,
But
it's
it's propaganda more than dogma.
totally. And it
Yeah.
was just, I just never seen anything like it. You're right. I compared it to like, well, is this, like communism? Like,
Well, I mean, look, there's a lot of people who believe that religion is a regurgitation of propaganda.
yeah, okay. Well,
Like
yeah,
if you start questioning, in Hebrew school, there was always somebody who said something,
right.
usually me, and it was not well received by the Hebrew school teacher. It was
Yeah.
like, what are you
Well,
challenging
so,
this?
and I do remember in Sunday school when I was young, asking a lot of questions and getting so frustrated when I saw contradictions. And there's plenty of contradictions. Now, the thing about Judaism that I love is that contradictions are welcome. Thank you very much. We
Right,
love
right,
them.
right. Well, paradox and unity are not foreign to each other. That there is in the unity of thinking, there is paradox. And you study in dyads, you argue with each other which is annoying when we're just standing in a supermarket with other Jewish people, but
Yeah.
you know, because then it's still an argument.
It's true. It's
But
true.
it's kind of it gives you critical thinking.
Yes.
And
Okay, now watch this serendipity. I'm living in Owen Sound with my mom now. I'm 12. I'm 13, 14, going through school. And to my knowledge, I've never met a Jewish person. No consciousness that Jews even exist in the world. Nothing, just a blank slate. But I become interested in acting. And it really, I feel looking back, saves me because, I've got all these kind of emotional walls from my experience. And here's a way to express emotion in a safe way because
right,
you're acting a part,
right.
right? So it was a gift to me acting. And I got involved in our community's little theater and in my school plays and high school musicals and whatnot. The Own Sound Little Theater, they decide the year I'm 15, to do the play, The Diary of Anne Frank.
Oh, wow.
I audition and I get the part of Anne Frank. Remember, I don't even know that Jews exist. I don't know anything about the Holocaust, like nothing,
Wow.
nothing. So, such a sheltered upbringing, really a dummy, like totally nothing, not worldly. And I identify totally with the character of Anne Frank.
What was it about Anne?
Her joy of life, her hope and her optimism. And she's going through a hard time, the Holocaust, very hard time. I'm going through a hard time. Fast forward, Ralph, I have to in that moment because when I converted, I sat before a Beit Din and
Which is
this
the judge The
Yeah,
three
the three
judge jury.
rabbis or the three learned
Yeah,
men usually who
yeah,
are giving you entry or checking out your sincerity to be Jewish. And this little old Jewish guy, like so old, I couldn't believe he still was there. And he says, "So, Paula, tell me, why do you want to be Jewish? And what makes you feel akin to the Jewish people?" And I said, "Well, I've had this painful upbringing. Like I've had this pain in my life." And so I identified with Anne Frank and the pain, and he lost it on me. How
right,
dare you compare your
right. Your small
your small so
Tera pain
exactly right,
to
but
anything we've done. Yes, yeah,
anything.
yeah,
And that was an interesting wake up for me because I both appreciated the audacity of comparing my little individual pain to the Holocaust, which Anne Frank symbolized. Like for me, she was a person who went through these particular experiences, but you have to
yeah.
extrapolate it. And also the understanding that you can't measure someone's pain and someone's strife. It really is equal. You know, we all have suffering, we all have pain. There's no point in the measurement.
Right.
There's the point of connecting. That's, of value.
And personal pain can't be gaslit, and when it is, it becomes a shameful piece. Oh, I don't deserve to feel that my father, who I was so close to, that I would snuggle with and talk about spirituality, has become a stranger in my life. I'm supposed to pretend that's okay. That's
Mhm.
nothing. Well, it wasn't nothing. It was my universe, and now
Look
my
who thinks
universe
he's
is
Gornish.
different.
I was thinking of that. Look who thinks he's Gornish.
Yeah,
When you were talking about Musar and
yeah, yeah. Well, your husband
That's
and I have a good laugh about that once in a while. Oh, look who thinks he's nothing.
so that
Zimmerman, he's
began
on the
my
floor.
path.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
began my
Okay,
identification.
now wait a minute. Now,
Okay.
so Diary of Anne Frank becomes the point where you, for the first time, even understand the Jewish experience. Now, I can relate to people who've never met a Jew, being the Jew people have never met. At University of Alberta in Edmonton, I was bumping into all kinds of people who were in university already and had never met someone Jewish. And of course, being Jewish, I would end up with, "Do you like my horns?" and all this other stuff. Just because, you're so like surprised as this person saying, "I've never met a Jewish person." He's like, "Wow, really? Well,
How did that
here I
happen?
am." So anyway, so you get that, and that becomes the beginning of a deeper inquiry, or it's the first flash and you move on.
It does seem, it seems like the kind of thing where when you learn a new word, there should be a word for it. When you learn a new word and then suddenly you see it everywhere.
Right, right.
This awakening to Jews and Judaism. And I kept stumbling upon it over and over again. I finished high school and I went to York University for the BFA program. Well, 60% at that time, this is 1979, were Jewish. Like
Right.
on my floor, everybody was Jewish except for my roommate, who was Iranian, the last one out, and got her stamp, by the way, while the Canadian embassy was holding on to the.
Well, Ken Taylor was holding on to Americans,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so you've got one Iranian and a lot of Jewish people,
And
and
I'm
you're in show business,
yeah, because I'm in show business.
right?
Um, and I'm just soaking it up and I'm learning Hebrew for the first time. And the first Hebrew word I learned was Baruch.
Because it's the beginning of every blessing.
It's the beginning of every blessing. Exactly. So I took my name Barfoot and I kept the bar of Barfoot. And I changed my last name. This is years down the line. I changed my last name to the first Hebrew word I learned, Baruch. So it's an homage to
This
my
is when
dad.
you got converted, though. Not
Yes. So I'm
you
at York
didn't change it
University.
then.
Right. I drop out after first year. I
Hey,
drop out and I run away to Israel.
wow.
Some of my friends that I've made, they're going back to Israel. And I think kibbutz sounds so cool. I have to see that. I'm like an old hippie at heart, right?
Right.
So like just born, a decade late. Would have
I'm with
been
you. I'm with
only
you.
me, right?
I used to read Jerry Rubin's Do It, and I'd say to people, I would do it.
I
I just
would.
don't know how you do it. Just where do you go to do it? What is it? Right?
What
Because
is it?
my brothers were old enough for it, but I wasn't. Yeah.
Right. I know. When you're the youngest though, right? You kind of have, you kind of adopt the older generation's stuff and music and stuff.
I guess so. My sister was 3 years older, and she'd bring home, Jimi Hendrix, Are You Experienced? And, Sticky Fingers. And I'd just be like, wow, this is like, I'm hip because of my sister. This is cool.
I know it is cool.
All right,
My
so you
sister,
go to Israel. When you get to Israel, do you take this sort of immersive Jewish bath at that point? Do you start to feel like, okay, like, is there something that makes you think, for some people who end up converting to Judaism, there is this feeling that their soul has been Jewish at one point or another. For other people, it's this they can't explain it, but it's a constant attraction to things within the culture, if not the religion, that make them feel that there's a simpatico between them and that religion. What was the resonant note that was hitting you about being
it's
Jewish?
interesting, the two aspects you mentioned, because I would say all of the above, all
Hmm.
of the above. When I arrived in Israel, I was just smitten with the story of Israel, with the experience of being there, with when you when you go from Canada to Israel,
Yeah.
it's like the adrenaline
Yeah.
is up here instead of, here.
Yeah.
So you're living a higher pace, a higher consciousness, it feels like.
Yeah.
And, and
But you see, in my case, it's because one of the major pieces for me is that for the first time, I am walking around as a Jew in what is now, I'm the dominant culture.
yes,
Right. So when I used to do the stand up bit and say, oh, and people would say nothing, they said nothing because they didn't have to do anything to be Christian in an overwhelmingly Christian country. And
yeah,
Jews in Israel are secular often because I don't have to make a deal out of the fact that it's the holiest day of the year. The highways, I could drive a tricycle down the highway and not hit somebody. It's Yom Kippur, and that's that. Every government office has a mezuzah, a blessing scroll on the door.
the names of the streets, they're like
Everything.
prophets, and I mean it's
Right. So you're in the milieu. So, but for you, you're still coming into the flow of all this.
yeah, I hear what you're saying. So I would say that, as obnoxious as it may sound, I felt I was Jewish already. I'm Anne Frank, for goodness sake.
Wow. So you're gonna get that baked in guy after you again.
Yeah, I know that was quite the shock, right?
You're what? Yeah. No.
But so what's really interesting is, I was in Israel for 2 years. Uh,
Hmm.
by the ninth month of my time there, I started in a conversion program, which I only heard about. Back up a little bit, because it was interesting that I was going to go to kibbutz, if you remember.
Yes.
I heard you go to kibbutz, they'll teach you Hebrew, it's going to be great. I'm a farm girl, that could be cool, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then there was a job open at a company called Kenes, Kenes. They're a big tour company at the time, and they organized international conventions, academic
Right.
conventions. And one of the organizers, Edna Peled, she wanted an assistant, like a secretarial assistant. And so I got the job because I could type and speak English, I guess. I don't know. And I was reasonably, could put words together. And it was a fantastic job because I got to tour all over Israel, be in all the hotels, registering people, and just really fun staff. And there was a woman who worked in the communications office, and she would get the teletypes, and she would get all the information coming in from different scholars for different conventions and tours and such. And she was from Holland. Her husband was Jewish, Israeli, and they'd married in Cyprus because they couldn't
Yes.
get married in Israel.
Very
And
common.
now they're living in Israel. Their marriage is not recognized there at that time. And they want to have kids. So she has to convert to get married to him.
Convert Orthodox.
Convert. Well, that's all there was. There was
Right.
nothing else.
Just for people listening, if you're not a convert, an Orthodox convert, you're not recognized legitimately as being Jewish. So if you're from the Reform or Conservative movement or the Renewal movement, and you want to get married, even if you're both Jewish, and one of you had a mother who was a convert for Reform synagogue. In my Israel documentary, I talked to a couple. The husband is Moroccan, so he's fine. He's many generations, but the woman he wants to marry, her mother had converted in England Reform, so she was no longer legitimate, even though she had grown up in Israel, served in the army, and was working as an Israeli. They had to go to Cyprus to get married and then come back as a legally married couple, but not recognized by the state. So that kind of nonsense goes on to this day. Sorry, I just needed to clarify that.
I was, thank you for that. I was intrigued by the fact that she was going through. She had to get her own apartment. They couldn't live together during this either because they had.
Of course, you're not supposed to.
Was Meshuggah, as we say. A little crazy. And so I joined her conversion class. I met with the rabbi that was doing her class, and we would go for classes twice a week. And the funny thing is, Ralph, anyone who knows me well knows that I'm not the best in the kitchen. I'm not the balabusta, not the cook. My hubby does all the cooking. He's amazing at it. He says, you're going to have to die first, because if I die first, you're going to starve.
Or I'm going to do takeout. Tell him.
I'll get takeout.
You're not that important. I can get takeout.
That important. Yeah. Anyway, it was all cooking, Ralph. They had a model kitchen, and 90% of what we did.
Wow. How amazingly sexist.
Unbelievable, right?
Wow, how insulting.
And odd that I stuck it out.
Yeah. That's very interesting.
Yeah, very strange.
I mean, were you gathering spiritual strings here at the same time, or was this just sort of an acculturation, a sort of an osmosis where you didn't even really notice how much you were getting drawn in?
At that point, I didn't think about spirituality. I thought about identity.
Right.
And I felt such a strong identity that I wanted to confirm the identity. And that was the driving force for me.
Right.
And so I guess that can be spiritual in a way. We have different motivators and drivers at different times, different engines working, right?
Right, but you weren't going, I'm going to explore Judaism through the lens of Heschel, or I'm going to explore through the lens of
learn it in any way. So, it's interesting. So I was 22 at that time, and I'm going to turn 60 in April coming up. That's way longer that I've been Jewish than I have not been Jewish at this point. And it's kind of mind-boggling that I work as Jewish clergy now.
Is it? I wonder sometimes, because I see you up there. I see you up there in the Bima and doing a service, and capturing the soulfulness of what Judaism is about. And you have the most lovely singing voice, but you're also totally present to what's going on up there. Your husband, no less, is the rabbi standing beside you, which makes it even more of an energy level piece. And then I wonder to myself, Christmas. Does Christmas literally ring any bells for you at this point in your life?
So tonight, at 7, we're having a Barfoot holiday family time, which I've organized because we've just kind of not been keeping in touch very well. And that's because, my siblings and my nieces and my nephews, they'll be celebrating Christmas pandemically.
Right.
So I said, let's have a Zoom gathering for that. And usually, sometimes, not every year, but I would go and gather with a Barfoot type party on Christmas Eve or something like that, just to be with my family, right?
Hmm.
And my daughter and I both love music. Well, all my kids love music, but my daughter and I, when we're driving to that party, because she and I are the stalwarts, we like to go to that party. And, my husband doesn't like to go. The boys don't really like to go. So it's usually Rebecca and I were driving to Kitchener where they live. Sorry, that wasn't clear. And that's the night we listen to all the Christmas music on the radio.
Hmm.
And that's sufficient.
Right. But it's there. It's in you too.
It's memory, right? It's memory.
Yeah. And Christmas, I've my first wife was a convert.
Mhm.
So we did Christmas because her mother seriously was never going to be a convert, and she was English, and there was a way of doing Christmas, and she did it. Um, uh, and I was a bit of a Scrooge about it, you know.
You were?
Yeah, I wasn't. I didn't embrace it. I would be like, we never had a tree in the
No.
house, but on the other hand, I'm thinking, well, where's my? And even though my wife had converted, it's like this was still her mother, and it was still her family, her sisters, and I said, we tried a tree one year, and I just thought,
Doesn't
this
feel right.
feels kind of weird to me, like just weird. So she said, okay, we don't have to do this anymore. And in retrospect now, I think to myself, did you really need to be like that? Or could you just embraced, I really believe in deep ecumenism. I believe in,
Mm.
in, in a multi-faith thing, and not just, by visiting that stuff, but, like Reb Zalman says, how do you get it on with God? And this is a way that people get it on with God. So why not just, celebrate that with them? It's not the cooties, nothing bad's going to happen to me, but
Well, may I interrupt? I'm
of
sorry.
course, please do.
Um, you know, being a spiritual seeker, and like I really took that seriously and examined different paths, especially when I learned more about Jewish spirituality, Kabbalah and mysticism and Heschel, as you said before, and different theologians in Judaism. I also made me and getting involved in spiritual direction, which I know you also have been on that
Indeed.
path as
We're
well.
we're both spiritual directors,
Right.
yes.
It made me look at, and you do read sources when you're studying spiritual direction from Catholicism, especially. The Jesuits were very foundational in that methodology.
Absolutely.
So, what I where I landed at, because I was at that place too, where yeah, why don't you just like take this and this from these different traditions and
Right.
whatever's sparking you, it's great. But my vision of my own path, because it's just my vision, is there's kind of this, let's say, mountain, let's say there's elevation, right? And so there's some kind of yearning we seek to get more knowledge or more oneness there. And there are, they say many paths up the mountain, many different spiritual paths you can take. But if you're jumping around from path to path, I'm not sure you're going to get further ahead.
Oh no, I've struggled with this over the years of
Right. Me too. Me too.
there's such a thing as spiritual materialism where really
Right.
it just becomes, more fun to never commit to any particular path, but without the rigor of that path, there are
Yeah.
depths or heights you will never achieve. And I get that totally, but that doesn't mean that I can't. So with my friend Marty Tyndall, who I spoke about earlier, my question was, look, I had a disrespectful relationship with Jesus Christ growing up. It was a snarky little joke. Oh, come on, he's just a Jewish rabbi. He's not, nice guy, but the son of God, that kind of stuff, right? A way of diminishing it and discounting it. And I was never comfortable with that as I got older. And I just thought, who am I to start denigrating other people's path to the same thing? Who am I to denigrate Muhammad ascending to heaven, blessed be his name, on a winged horse? Oh, what do
All
you?
powerful stuff, right?
Yeah, well, okay, we'll try reading the Torah for 45 minutes and you'll see enough stuff to make you go, what on earth are they talking about? This is nuts.
Yeah.
Because to me, it's all metaphor. It's all poetry. It's all an internal journey. Pharaoh isn't a guy. He's not Yul Brenner. right?
Although he made a very good.
Even very good one, and he was Jewish. No, Pharaoh is internal. It's our own tyrant that runs our life into directions we don't need. And God, to me, is not a noun; it's a verb. It's a unifying action of creation, so that I can share that with everybody, and I can learn from everybody else the beautiful wisdoms that they have. Matthew Fox is a wonderful proponent of a multi-faith way of being a spiritual being,
Mhm.
right? With ritual and the things that ground you. So for me, I tend to feel like it's one thing to visit other faiths, kind of do some spiritual tourism.
Mhm.
It's another thing to go, what is it like to really appreciate that, as Marty told me, Jesus Christ is not what is on his license, his driver's license. Jesus is the human manifestation of the divine. Christ is a cosmic consciousness. They're two different pieces of the same thing. So by doing that, I actually gain more knowledge of what it is to be Jewish, not less.
Absolutely. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I was ranting.
No, it's
So let me ask you then,
oh,
as you then evolve, it's one thing to convert to Judaism. It's another thing to become a full-blown clergy who can lead services, who reads, Jewish literature, who helps people through births and deaths and marriages and bar mitzvahs.
mhm.
What made you want to go that far?
It's a great question, and I think we all as individuals have certain gifts, talents, things we're good at, things we're not good at.
Mm-hmm.
And this role just kind of kept emerging as something that satisfied. Um, okay, I don't want to, it sounds terrible to go back to acting and say,
No, no,
good at
that's
acting, was good at performing. And it takes some of those skills,
of
the
course,
presence, the grace, the expression, but putting that together with authenticity and spiritual meaning and the listening and the vessel that you make for others who are seeking and want to connect and want their spirits raised or their questions answered, or just to bubble and look at what prayer might be in there for them. I think those were my talents, all led me in that direction.
right.
And thank God, right? I feel what I do is really meaningful, for me. And sometimes others tell me that they find what I do moving and helpful and nurturing and educational and spiritually enlivening for them. So that's a wonderful gift. It's a wonderful role to be able to play in people's lives for sure.
Beautifully put. The voice, we did a welcome to Hamilton for Syrian refugees when I first moved to Hamilton about 4.5 years ago, 5 years ago, and we were at New Vision Church on Main, and that's where there was the National played and Drew Hayden, all these people played, and Max Kerman, and it was all fun. It was great, tons of energy. Yeah, lots of people, giving money. It was really good. Tarek,
But I have, Ralph.
the Arkells,
The
perfect,
Arkells Campfire Chords book. Just
perfect.
wow. Yeah, it's exciting.
So we're leaving near the end of the night, and the clergy who runs that church, the priest who runs that church, is saying goodbye, and he said, "Wow, I'd love to see that many people in my church on a regular basis." And I said, "Tonight was church," and we kind of looked at each other, and I said, a U2 concert for some people is church, right? They're waving their phone in the air. It used to be a Bic lighter. Now they're waving their phone in the air. But, they're in countries where they don't even speak English and they're going, and I still haven't found what I'm looking, because they're all in it together. And
Right.
there's something about the song that for my experience of it, and when I look around at people, we are able to lose ourselves and our rationality and our brain defense of what we believe and don't believe and who we like and who we don't, and we're just together. I just posted a thing on my Not That Kind of Rabbi Facebook page of Muslims, Christians, and Jews from 2 years ago in Jerusalem, in the old city, singing
The
together.
Kukulam group, the choir,
Oh
choir,
my!
choir of Jerusalem.
And
Amazing.
I literally found myself crying. I was
Yeah, me
crying because
too.
I just thought, you know, the point isn't just to be of one team or another. It's the point of coming together through the specifics that we need to get there.
And as you said, I mean, so my ministry is musical.
Right.
And as a cantor, I am leading the musical part of worship and delving into that and studying that and that's a really interesting thing for our community because before I was their cantor, I think they were used to singing the same melody for the prayers like over and over again.
Right.
And they were very resistant to learning any new melodies. And I am the kind of person that needs to change and grow it all the time. So there was a bit of a misbalance there. I
Mm.
had to be patient and not change too much. And they learned to appreciate that if I bring new music, it's going to be thoughtful and it's going to give them something new. And they are open to learning and appreciating.
Well, there's the tension of that, right? But have you ever encountered when people disagree with what you're doing with something in Judaism, an undercurrent of you're a convert?
Never. I think when I was early as a convert, when I earlier,
Mm.
I came back to Canada. I went to University of Guelph to finish up my degree. And at that time, Edmund Lipschitz was the head of the, what did they call it then? The Canadian Jewish Council, the
Uh,
group,
Canadian Jewish Congress?
yes, Canadian Jewish
Yes.
Congress. And they used to do, they had clubs in all the universities. And I was
Right.
the president at Guelph. It was so chutzpahdik, right? This role contact, she's converted. And my name was still Barfoot when I came back. And he did the Jewish geography thing to me. I
Mm.
was at a meeting and he goes, Paula Barfoot is Jewish. And I had to tell him my conversion story. And the next month, I started the process for changing my name, and it was to avoid that.
So
Sure.
he was trying to shame you.
Oh, I don't want to put that harsh. I think he
Well,
was curious.
yeah, I would have come back with, well, Lipschitz. Your Lipschitz, my ass talks. And then I just would
Oh
have left
my
the room.
goodness. Oh no, Oliver Shalom. He really was a lovely man. I didn't mean to shed any shade there. He was
So
just
here's another interesting piece for a clergy. The we'll go to Carl Jung for this one. In that the people have a shadow side. Everyone has a shadow, but clergy are not allowed to show that shadow. So we're never you're not allowed to if you are in the spiritual business. Um, the caricature is of always having a life that's glowing with light. How do you console yourself to the tensions of being a human being who has ups and downs and goods and bads and lights and darks and being a clergy leader?
so. First of all, I'm so lucky that I'm part of a clergy couple because my husband has been a rabbi, for so many years, and I come to this role more recently that I studied to be a cantor. Now, so he kind of takes that spiritual exemplary role, and he's got to be comfortable with that role, and
Mm.
that allows me in the same congregation to be a little bit more dual, to
That's
show a little
true.
bit more questioning or doubt or the other side of things.
Yeah. But you're also the by his own admission, the one who is the connector to heart to heart with so many people.
I guess.
Yeah,
But
you
maybe
bring that
that's less
energy.
because I'm a spiritual exemplar and
Mm.
more because they maybe see me as more real.
Right. And maybe a little more extroverted.
Well, that's for sure.
I'll get to him in another episode. Um,
He was so jealous.
was he?
You asked me first. He goes, I don't understand. Like,
Will we go
I
for
said, maybe he
walks?
doesn't want to talk to you. Like
No,
maybe.
actually, I
I was
want to
so
have him.
excited.
I want to have him and Rabbi Ed Elkin,
Oh my
who
gosh.
was my rabbi for 20 years in
And they
Toronto.
went to school together.
I
There's
know
like
that's.
some
I want
great
to have them on
stories.
together. It'll be crazy.
That'll be so interesting. They did a
Yeah,
year in Israel together.
yeah.
Fascinating.
The whatever institute. What's it called? What, what's the name of that? I can't remember.
HUC,
Yeah,
Hebrew
I don't know.
College, whatever.
No, no. There was a whole other Hartman Institute. Did he do the
Oh,
Hartman?
yeah, that's
Yeah,
later in a rabbi's life. You go to Hartman.
yeah. Exactly, exactly. And Ed went. He had a great time. Um, where do you see your spirituality growing these
Mm.
days? Where's it going?
Wow, that is so interesting. I feel like I'm on the cusp of a change, and I'm just kind of trying to figure out where that is.
Hmm.
It's something to do. It's definitely something to do with aging.
Hmm.
It's definitely something to do with. I keep thinking about legacy for some reason.
Well,
What
for
do we
every
leave
reason.
behind? What can I do that's going to have an impact, longer than my mourners remember that I was alive?
Right.
So I don't know, like that's very egotistical as well. And but I don't experience it as ego. It's just kind of a bubbling, an urge, a something like I need to give something. What will it be?
Right. Well, you mentioned in April you'll be 60, right?
Yes.
So that's important, right? That's an
It's getting
important.
to be. And it's just so interesting how different things awaken in you at different times.
You
in your
know, in the workshops I do,
Mhm.
I do a modification of the idea of the vidui, the reckoning, as it were. That is really simpler than that, and it's who have you loved, and who has loved you back. That's important.
Mhm.
Um, what are you most proud of now? Not 30 years ago or 20 years from now. Now, what are you most proud of? And then what do you regret?
Mhm.
And when someone says, I don't have any regrets, I
Oh my
go,
goodness. How could you not have heaps of regrets? Who are these people?
I have to take them into a side room at that point and go,
Yes, smack
okay,
them
can we
around.
have a conversation here? Can we define regret?
Mhm.
And then the last one is, what do you want to be remembered for?
Mm.
Right. And it's
Yeah.
part of that harvesting of our wisdom to do this work. And it does lead us away from the path that has gotten us to where we were, which was ego. Ego was what we needed to push through these different things. And now it's an exploration of true self. So you find people who say, I used to play the guitar when I was a kid, and then I stopped because I thought this is not for a grown-up person. I got to go make a living. Or I used to paint, or those are some of the simpler examples. But then they come back to it at 60. They come
Well, that's
back
so
to
interesting because I went out and I on Kijiji bought a flute because in high school I played a flute and I haven't had one for all these years. And I want to know, do I remember? What does it feel like? And
yeah,
it's just so funny that the instincts that you're talking about are so real.
right, because really what we're on the journey for in autumn for a lot of people is a journey back to self,
Mhm.
and not to the representation we've given to people so that we could make a living, so that we could raise a family, so that we could go into the bank officer for the mortgage and have them take us seriously, right? And not have a tattoo on our head that says press here for more beer nuts.
Ralph, do you find this like I find in my spiritual development, you talk about wisdom. I feel dumber and dumber,
Why?
dumber and dumber. Like I know less and less.
Well, I think that's humility. I think that's grace and
Look who
humility.
thinks they're garnished.
Right. So I think it is when we allow for our humility, then we allow for this not being about certainty. You know, people, I think, misrepresent the idea of faith as certainty. And it's not, it's a method of exploration. It's a trust exercise,
Mm-hmm.
and it ebbs and flows. It has its good and its moments and its bad moments. But I do think that what we stop trying to do is be right. And what we look for is better questions.
I love that. I love that.
Right. So to me, that's the spiritual journey is
Mm-hmm.
to be able to say, I can now ask these questions from a place of knowing that life is, as Stephen Jenkinson says in Die Wise, the human lifespan is not life. It is just the moment we have in this incarnation, in the
Mm-hmm.
flow of ever present life. To
We've had a
me,
lot of funerals lately,
yeah, I bet.
endemically, and funerals are just such an interesting part of what we do. Like you see people and you comfort them at the most challenging time, and you're kind of the person that's kind of explaining and accompanying them on this understanding of the spirit, what happens with the soul. Honestly, we don't know. We
So what do you,
sense that there's something bigger, and we may have all had different experiences of maybe I was with my mom when she died, and there was a palpable feeling of this whooshing, I don't want to say light, but if I was going to translate it into something visual, I would say light.
but energy, if nothing else.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
this waxy nothing body left.
Right. Ramdas talks about that. It's a spacesuit with your name on it. I've spoken about it on this program.
Mm.
You know, it's there. I was reading something recently about the idea that you don't have a soul, you are a soul.
Right.
Like in your entirety, you are a soul, not my soul tells me this. And that really has me thinking. And that's what I love about good questions, right? So um, the Diamond Sutra of Buddhism that says that this piece of paper is made of fibers that are made of wood, that is made of a tree that grew in a forest, that is on a planet in a solar system, in a galaxy of 500 million, minimum 500 million galaxies. So the energy, the stardust in this and the stardust in me, and the unification of those two things is what I worry about sometimes. I'll torture your husband more with this when we talk, but what I worry about is that religion sometimes gets reduced to, for many people, particularly in their learning as children, a series of fairy tales that are not rational, so therefore not worth considering as we grow older, because what grown-up believes that you hit a rock and water comes out of it or blood comes out? What are you talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Right? But if I hit the rock of my existence, at the right time in the right moment, then the flow of water is the energy of my life. So it all depends how you take it, right? So I when I hear the music, it does a different thing to me. I was listening to Bacha Levine, a young singer from the Piers, Brooklyn. And in the Sephardic, in Moroccan tradition, my tradition, there are no such thing as nigunim, wordless melodies.
It's all about
And
the words.
right, but it's also it's in an Arabic tilt, right? I mean, the way we do what we do when we sing is almost indistinguishable from what a Muslim would do with their singing, because we're Arab Jews. That's what we do. But she had this wonderful riff in her karov, which was "Ayom babadi dai, yabadi dai, yabadi dai yo." And I just,
You can just hear the yearning in that, right?
yeah, yeah. To me, that's what can transcend for the. So people
Huh.
say to me, I'm singing in Hebrew. I don't even know what I'm singing. I don't know enough Hebrew to know. And I go, who cares?
It does not matter.
It's not
It does
rational.
not matter.
We should all get together and sing a voodoo language together that puts us in a room where we're not going, you said that word wrong,
Exactly.
right? What do you really mean by that? Who cares? You're now,
You know who's very powerful at the melody and having people join is Joey Weisenberg.
oh yeah, lovely stuff.
Incredible.
And he does, half of what he does is like blues Americana and Jewish,
Mhm.
Yiddishkeit, which is very interesting.
Yeah,
So you're going to be 60.
I am.
You're exploring yourself in different ways. You're wondering about legacy. This is going to be a very interesting time for you, I
So
think.
I think so.
Yeah. We have to stop, which is, well, we'll end up talking because heck, we know each other. Um, um, Tell the rabbi,
Not
he's
to
in,
worry.
not to worry. It's it's me and him and maybe Ed, and I'll see if I can cook
Oh,
that up.
that'll be so fun.
That would be fun.
So fun.
I want to thank you. I want to bless you. And when you're barfooting the Christmas carols, enjoy every single one of them, because for me, if I don't watch Alistair Sim's A Christmas Carol on Christmas Eve, it ain't Christmas,
Awesome.
right? And It's a Wonderful Life on Christmas Day, or it ain't Christmas,
Right.
right? So I can still dig the holiday.
Well,
And thank you for everything you do as a spiritual leader. It's a wonderful thing to know you and to see you animate the what could be turgid text into just lovely feeling for
well, I
people.
feel so blessed to have you in our community, Ralph, and to be a friend. It's an honor.
Cantor Paula Baruch been my guest on Not That Kind of Rabbi. I'm Ralph Ben Murgy. If you want, go to my Facebook page, Not That Kind of Rabbi, and, send me some comments. If you're interested in spiritual direction, spiritual counseling, I do take people on as a spiritual counselor. And to do that, just go to my email. That's the simplest thing to do. Ralph Ben Murgy, just Google that and you'll see the spelling. It's a little difficult for people because it's Spanish grammar. But Ralph Ben Murgy, one word, at gmail.com. Just got a new inquiry today. So it doesn't matter what faith you are or what faithless you are. As Reb Zalman used to say, when people come in for spiritual counseling and go, look, let's get this straight. I don't believe in God. And Reb Zalman's answer was, well, tell me about the God you don't believe in. And that always worked, because then you realize they're talking about Santa Claus, which is an entirely different guy. The fact that it's a guy is an entirely different idea. Thank you for listening to the program, and you take care of each other and be well and be safe. And Cantor Paula, thank you very much for doing this with me.
This podcast has been produced by TMDS and accelerated by Roam Phone. Roam Phone brings you the most reliable virtual phone service to run your business and protect your home number from unwanted calls. Visit roamphone.ca to get started.